Yemenis remember April 27 as the Day of Democracy under the rule of late leader Ali Abdullah Saleh. Regional efforts order hopes for Yemenis to have peace and end the healthy coup. Government forces defend multiple Houthi attacks in Ma'rib during Eid holiday. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fuad. Almost 15 years have passed since the last election was held in Yemen on the 27th of April. Yemenis continue to remember this date as the date which offered them democracy under the rule of the former late leader Ali Abdullah Saleh. This report has more details.
The 27th of April, as soon as this day falls every year, the Yemenis remember democracy, which gave them the right to elect and choose who represents them in the government, whether at the local, legislative or presidential level. A day of difference and a major transformation in the modern history of Yemen through legislative, constitutional and legal steps. However, Yemenis didn't expect these prohibitions in light of the front regimes that prevailed for many decades, by which the citizen is shackled, so he has no right except to hear and obey. President Ali Abdullah Saleh established the democratic system and free elections as a national option to build a new Yemen, a democracy that allowed the citizen to exercise his right to choose his representatives in the legislative, executive and local authorities, and opened the way for all parties and activities to practice political work and run in the democratic cycles on the basis of competition. Between the first entitlement and the subsequent stations, the features of the great transformation were evident of what happened to democracy in Yemen. This important history of democracy, the political forces worked after the catastrophe of February 11 to exclude it from the dictionary of the Yemenis, which was for them a democratic outlet that ends of coup and monopoly on governance. After President Ali Abdullah Saleh handed over power to his successor, President Hadi, on February 2012, amid elections for a transitional period of 2 years, to embody the most wonderful images of democracy in the peaceful transfer of power for the first time in the history of Yemen. Unfortunately, however, it was the last stage of democracy that Yemen experienced, to be led down by the political forces that demanded the overthrow of the regime without having a national project to turn Yemen towards a depth that has not yet been established but has been stripped of democracy. Then came the Houthi coup in September 2014, which robbed Yemen of democracy and all means of life.
Chairman of the Presidential Leadership Council discussed in Cairo with the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi bilateral relations and ways to enhance them. El-Alimi appreciated Egypt's role in receiving hundreds of thousands of Yemenis and providing them with necessary care in different areas. For his part, President el-Sisi highlighted the historical relations between the two brotherly countries and Egypt's firm stance on supporting Yemen and its people. The third naval evacuation convoy arrived at Jeddah today, coming from Port Sudan carrying 1,687 people of 58 different nationalities who were evacuated from Sudan. Among those evacuated were 239 Yemenis, 13 Sudanese, 960 Indonesian, 198 Sudanese, and 26 Turk. This is the third evacuation trip to reach Saudi Arabia coming from Sudan. The recent Houthi talks have raised hopes of Yemenis to have peace and end the 9-year conflict. The Van report has more details.
Despite concerns about the Houthi group's evasiveness and the Iranian regime's traditional opportunism, Yemeni officials are optimistic that an expedited pace towards a workable plan would eventually lead to the restoration of peace and the end of the coup that began in late 2014. Recent developments in the region, such as the agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran to end the conflict, have boosted Yemeni hopes for peace. This is centered on the idea that Tehran will put pressure on the Houthi party to accept the fair agreement offered by Saudi and Omani mediators. Saudi officials have been in Sana'a since Sunday for talks with the Iranian-backed Houthi militia as part of new efforts to end Yemen's 9-year conflict. The recent Saudi and Omani delegations' intense negotiations with the Houthi leaders in Yemen's capital Sana'a marked a significant step forward in the drive for peace. According to leaked information, a well-defined plan has been developed, which includes reinforcing the ceasefire, expanding the ceasefire in areas relevant to humanitarian assistance such as salaries, openings of crossings, and easing limitations on airports and seaports. The framework concludes with an agreement on a negotiating path leading to long-term peace. The Houthi group leaders deliver mixed signals on social media, making it unclear whether they are genuine about peace. However, if Iran and other nations put pressure on them, they may abandon their destructive ideals. According to the United Nations, this is the best chance in years to stop the war. It has also expressed concern about the possibility of the situation worsening again. Iran-Saudi relations are still in the early phases of restoration. More importantly, although foreign countries push their own goals in an impoverished and weak country like Yemen, this was never merely a proxy conflict. The situation is fractious and multifaceted, and it has become worse over time.
The Yemeni capital Sana'a recorded 3 drowning deaths, including 2 children, during the past hours. Local sources confirmed the death of a 5-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl in the pool located in west of Sana'a. On the same day, a young man named Murad Ahmed Saleh died due to drowning while he was swimming. Local sources in Al Bayda Governorate reported the death of 1 civilian and the serious injury of another as a result of a mine explosion. The mines laid by the Houthi militia in different areas of Al Bayda Governorate constitute a nightmare that threatens the lives of civilians, claiming lives on an almost daily basis. The United Nations announced that 8,000 displaced families have been affected by the recent floods in Yemen. The floods have so far affected 8,000 displaced families, mainly in IDP sites, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said in a statement. The statement added the floods caused displacement and damage to public property and infrastructure, as well as the loss of crops and livestock. The government forces defended multiple Houthi attacks in Ma'rib Governorate during the Eid holiday. This report has more details.
Several terrorist Houthi strikes were carried out on the fronts of Ma'rib during Eid al-Fitr. The militia engaged in armed conflict in many regions controlled by government troops and attempted to infiltrate the fronts of Al-Aqt and Al-Balaq. With their attacks thwarted, they suffered both personal and material losses.
The Houthis have tried to attack after Eid, but our men were on high alert. We remain vigilant and are ready to thwart any strikes against Ma'rib.
The Houthi militia launched a new military offensive on the south of Ma'rib, but it was repelled by the tenacity of government soldiers who foiled these advance efforts in Al-Aqt and Al-Balaq. The government forces immediately extinguished the militia's fire, inflicting losses on the invading elements and forcing the Houthi forces to flee. Meanwhile, 3 government soldiers were killed as a result of artillery shelling.
On this southern front, opposite to Ramla and Balaq, the militias are attempting to infiltrate our territory. However, our troops are ready to exact heavy casualties on the Houthis. The infiltration attempts were still ongoing throughout Eid.
These Houthi movements come after cautious calm that the Ma'rib front witnessed, which raises the question regarding whether the Houthis are serious about peace.
Coming next. The main coronation in Mahra Governorate lacks basic entertaining facilities. Welcome back. The main coronation in Mahra Governorate lacks the basic entertaining facilities due to the government neglect. This has made people choose to spend Eid holiday on other places. The following report has more details.
On the edge of the sidewalk of Corniche Al Ghaida, the capital of Al Mahra Governorate, Saleh Burkan sits with his children with a smile on his face, sharing with them the joy of Eid al-Fitr, which is the only sanctuary for the residents, despite the neglect and absence of entertainment services.
Unfortunately, Al Mahra Corniche is in a very bad condition. The entertaining games are out of order and the children wish they could have fun.
Many things have changed in the Corniche. The place was very beautiful and people visited a lot. The hurricane destroyed the Corniche and people no longer visited. I'm sending a message through you to renew the Corniche.
The citizens wonders about the great neglect of this Corniche, which lacks many services that meet the needs of citizens who visited throughout the week. This project has been run since its inauguration more than 10 years ago by an investor from the government with a lease contract from the government.
The investor had started some reforms such as planting and installing lights, but the local authority asked him to stop based on the governor's word because the Saudi program exists and everything is under implementation. And since 2019, everything has stopped.
Away from the content of the statements and the divergent reactions, the question remains, how long will the only sanctuary for the citizens in Al Mahra Governorate continue in this deteriorating situation that lacks the most basic services, and for how long will the citizens need to wait to alleviate their suffering? That remains the last concern of the government.
Yemen participated in the International Conference on Intellectual Property and Innovation for Sustainable Agriculture in Geneva. The conference discusses a number of issues related to lands and agricultural inputs, cultivating, harvesting, and consumption for cultivation to marketing. The conference is of exceptional importance because it is being held at a time when global agriculture is facing major challenges. Banking sources revealed that there is a liquidity crisis in commercial banks in the capital Sana'a. The sources added that the banks refused to allow citizens to withdraw sums of money for them from their accounts under the pretext of lack of financial liquidity. The banking sector in Yemen has been experiencing acute liquidity crisis for more than a year as a result of the militia withdrawing funds from the banks. Medical sources in the capital Sana'a said the Houthi militia obscured medical statistics on the spread of children's diseases. According to the sources, the health sector run by the Houthi militia is responding with slowness and neglect to the spread of deadly children's diseases, for most of which is German measles. Last week, the United Nations announced that 77 Yemeni children had died and 9,418 others were infected with measles since the beginning of this year. The World Health Organization held the Houthi militia responsible for polio outbreaks in the areas under their control. In a statement issued by the organization, it indicated that the cessation of immunization operations in Houthi-controlled areas led to the continued outbreak of polio and other vaccine-preventable diseases. The organization expected an increase in cases of poliovirus infection in Yemen, with the continued obstacles imposed by the Houthi militia on vaccination campaigns. The Houthis have forced their supporters and officials to visit graveyards, where the tombs of some of their leaders are laid. Such visits, according to the militia, aim to instill in the loyalty of people for their group. This report has more details.
Houthi militias have forced loyalists and government officials to visit the graves of the dead militant during Eid celebrations, including the tomb of Houthi leaders. Millions of Yemenis in areas under Houthi control continue to suffer from miserable living conditions. The militia continue to pressure officials and residents in Sana'a to organize group visits to the graves. The sources pointed out that the group's pressures resulted in organizing groups visits by officials and residents in Sana'a over the past few days to some of the graves of the dead militants. The militias seek to mislead and deceive the local and international public opinion that their dead are popular in Yemeni society. The group also exploits religious and the other sectarian occasions to attract more young recruits, school students, and relatives of the dead. Meanwhile, the Houthi militia in Sana'a allocated sums of money to finance the daily visits to the graves through the so-called General Authority for Martyrs' Families' Welfare. Yemeni politicians in Sana'a said that the Houthi leaders spend lavish money and food aid on their supporters and provide care for the families of their dead through many entities that the group has established. Residents of several neighborhoods in Sana'a were forced by the militia supervisors recently to leave their homes to visit cemeteries. Some residents said that the co-supervisors threatened absentees with blacklists, saying those who didn't attend the visit will be denied access to some aid and liquefied domestic gas (LNG). The residents pointed out that the group supervisors transported residents of some neighborhoods to different ages in Sana'a to the cemeteries on buses. And the group targets new communities each day, forcing their residents to visit the graves of Samad and other officials across the governorate. They also ordered school principals to organize field trips to visit the cemeteries. Yemeni local sources stated earlier that the coup built over 100 new cemeteries for its dead in 7 governorates under its control: Sana'a, Saada, Al-Mahwit, Al-Hudaydah, Rayma, Eb, and Damar, to be added to the already established 400 cemeteries.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Yemenis remember April 27 as the day of democracy under the rule of late leader Ali Abdullah Saleh. Regional efforts offer hopes for Yemenis to have peace and end the Houthi coup. Government forces defend multiple Houthi attacks in Ma'rib during Eid holiday. This is the end of the news. It was Roshan Fouad. See you soon.